Alright guys, so a lot of you were interested in my weekly recap and how I format the videos to look how they do, so I figured I would make a video showing you guys how I actually make the format. So first of all, I have to just gather everything that I've done for the week, and I figured I would show you my gaming weekly recap because it's a little bit more complex and a little bit more interesting. So I had to gather all of the media that I'd made for that week, or in this case the previous 2 weeks. So I had 11 videos in total. And then I have to make some sort of layout to make those videos all fit together on one screen. So I go into Adobe Illustrator and I make my layout. And it just takes a lot of trial and error, kind of seeing what's going to fit and what's not going to fit. And eventually I end up with a good solution. And for this particular week, I had 11 videos. So I decided to add a subscribe button to make 12. And then I made this layout. And then once I've got this template made, the next thing I have to do is go back to my videos and drag them all into Sony Vegas. So once I loaded up the project file, I just dropped all of the different video clips into their own stream. And then I renamed them at the side just for convenience and such. And then the next thing that I had to do is figure out exactly how to make these videos fit into the template perfectly without having to resize each one exactly. So I got a little bit creative and I thought back to math class, and I decided that some basic algebra 1-2 would be my best solution. Because in this case, when you look at any of these as to how it resizes the videos, you don't make the video smaller, you make the picture frame bigger, basically, is how I describe it to people. So you're not actually making the picture any smaller, you're making the frame that it's in larger. And so you have to figure out exactly how large to make the frame to make it fit right, and also where to put the frame. So the first thing I figured out was how large I had to make the frame, which here you can actually see the dimensions. And I figured that out by going to this, and then I had to do a ratio. So I'm actually going to switch to real life and show you how I worked it out on paper. So in order to figure out how big to make that frame, I have to do a ratio. So the first part of that ratio is I have to figure out how big these little rectangles that the videos are supposed to go in are. And so all I have to do is click on it, and then in Illustrator it tells me the dimensions of that rectangle, which I can zoom in on right up at the top here. And in my particular case, those are the dimensions that I decided on for each rectangle. So those are going to relate in just a second. So let's transfer on down to my paper. And now I'm just going to do some really basic algebra. So basically all I have to do is figure out the ratio of that video clip to the ratio of the entire screen. So I have to figure that out on two different dimensions, being the width and the height. So I'm just going to do the width first. So the entire frame is 1920. And then we're going to pick up the number of the width for the small rectangle that the video goes in. So the width on that was 450. And then I'm going to do equals, and then that clip that's 450 is supposed to be a full-size 1080p video. So I'm going to put in 1920 again for 1920 by 1080, and then I'm going to put an X right here. And then all I've got to do is cross multiply and solve all that, and it will give me the dimension for the total frame width. So I'm going to plug that into a calculator real quick, and then I'll figure that out. Alright, so I figured that out, and we found out that the total width of the picture frame needs to be 8,192 pixels wide. So now all I have to do is do the same thing for the height. So once again I plugged that into the calculator, and I figured out that the total height of the frame needs to be 4,608 pixels. So now I'm just going to head back into Sony Vegas and show you where I have to enter those numbers. Alright, so I'm back into Sony Vegas, and I'm just going to show you how I resize the clip. So in this case, I'm just going to resize this one. So I have to click on this thing right here, which I have highlighted, which says Event Pan / Crop. And I just click on that, and it brings up this window, and I'm just going to scroll a little bit to zoom out. But you can see that the entire video is outlined. So where I have to enter those is where it says width and height. Imagine that. So I'm just going to type those numbers in, and now we can move this window to the side a little bit, and you can see that it's starting to get a little bit closer to the proper size. So now I'm just going to kind of move it, and once again you can see it's getting to be about the right size, but it would be really hard to align it perfectly by doing this. So instead, I'm going to use another ratio to figure out those dimensions. So I figured out that the way Sony Vegas places these videos is using these X center and Y center numbers right here. So all that means is the distance from this point right here, which is the center of that box, to the top left corner of the video. So all I have to do is use ratios to figure out those numbers and then type those in there for each of the clips, and they'll all be in the perfect spot. So I can just pop on down into Illustrator, and then I'm just going to click on this one since this is currently the video that we're working on placing. Click on the rectangle tool and draw a little box from the top left corner down to the center of the template. And then that will give me the dimensions for both the width and the height from the center to the top left corner right here. So now I have to go back onto paper and do some more little equations to figure this out. Alright, so in order to figure out those next dimensions, first I'm going to do the Y center, which in order to figure that out, I do 1080 divided by 4608 equals, and then as you can see that number is 1080, which is the height of the video clip, and 4608 is the number that we figured out for the total height of the picture frame. And then the equals, and then I'm going to look up at the Illustrator page, which I figured out that the height from the center to the top left corner is 291.375. So I just rounded that up since it only goes to 2 decimals, and I put 291.38 divided by x. And then we're going to solve for x, which I already solved this earlier, obviously, to make the video. So I figured out that that is 1243.2. So for row 1, the y center needs to be that. Now for column 1, since it's also in column 1, I'm basically going to do the same thing, but with 1920 and this number, 8192. And then the distance from the center to the top left corner for this is 936. And then once again, I already solved that, so x equals 3993.6. So I'm going to go back onto Sony Vegas and type in these two numbers, and it's going to move the video, and then we'll move on from there. So I'm back in Vegas, and I'm just going to type in those two numbers that we found earlier. So I figured out that the X center has to be 3993.6, and then the Y center is 1243.2. And then I'm just going to close that, and you see that it positioned the video perfectly. But I'm actually going to turn off this template since I didn't show you how I made that yet. So it just positions the video, and then I did the same formula for the next 11. Now, one of the different things is if the video is to the right of this center, it has to go negative on that axis, and if it is below, then it has to go negative on that axis. So I solved the others, obviously, to make this video, and then I typed in all those numbers and positioned all these different videos to fit the template. So once again, here's all the math that I did to do the original video when I made that recap last week. And I figured out all those numbers, of course, and I just typed them in, and it pre-fit all the videos like you saw them as they were already fit. So the next step is I just saved the Illustrator file for that template I made, and it's right here under this name. And then all I do is click that and drag it into Photoshop, which this is just a shortcut to the program itself. So I drop that right in there, and it loads up Photoshop, as you can see. And my graphics card sucks, so it gives me that message. But then I get this page. Now, all I have to do is come over here and change this to pixels, and then set this to 1920. And since it's linked, it automatically sets that to 1080, and if it wasn't, I'd make sure it was 1080. And then click OK, and it's going to be perfectly fit. Now, the last few times that I've done this, I tried to export that from Illustrator and then bring the JPEG into Photoshop and edit it that way, and I couldn't get it perfect. And then somehow I figured out this solution, which works perfect, so I'm just doing it this way from now on. And then all I do is select the Magic Wand tool, hold down my Shift key, and select all 12 of these white boxes, because I want those to be translucent so that you can see the video through them. So I just click delete, and they'll be translucent. And then in order to have this be see-through, I have to go up here and click Save As, and then I have to make sure that I save it as a .png, because if I save it as a JPEG, then it's just going to save white in those spaces, which is just how JPEGs work, versus PNG, which is able to save translucent. So I saved that already, so I don't need to do it again. Just going to close this out, and then you can see the .png file right there. I dragged it right into the Vegas project, and then just drag it down here, and since it was already 1080, it fit perfectly. So I'm just going to turn that layer back on, and then you can see how it overlaid. And then, of course, the final thing I had to do was click on Audacity down here and record like I'm doing right now, and just record my audio and put this in here and make it all fancy and nice. And then I just had to go through every clip and add a little bit of a crossfade at the beginning and the end, just to make it look a little bit nicer when the video starts and ends, as well as fades on the audio. And then one thing I forgot to cover is I did have to go to Google Images and take some of these pictures, because you can see, for example, right in this, that the video ends too soon before the actual audio is done. So I had to just put in a still image of the gun. So I just took that image off of Google Images and laid it in there. So I did that for that, and this one down here. And all the other videos were long enough just to use the entire video all the way through. And then, of course, I made the little subscribe button. I took one off Google Images, and then I made the background black in Photoshop, exported it as 1080p, and then just put it right in here. And then, of course, the final thing I had to do to make it so that you guys can watch it is come up here, click Render As, and then after a lot of struggles, because for some reason Vegas Pro has problems rendering, I finally got the right profile working properly. So I just named it 1080p, which this is my export settings. My bitrate's not too great, but it's good enough, especially for YouTube quality. And then here's the sound settings. And I made sure it's a .mp4 just because I like that format because it's pretty universal. I would like to figure out how to do H.264 encoding to make uploads faster, but unfortunately I don't know how to do that at this time. So I'm just going to figure out a way to do that later on when I have a little bit more time to work with it. But all I do is click that, rename it, and render it out, and then it's ready for uploading to YouTube. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching my little behind the scenes on how I make my weekly recap videos. So I just kind of hope that gives you a perspective as to the work that goes into it. So I hope you guys appreciate the effort that I do put into them, and I hope you guys enjoy watching those videos. But anyways, guys, that's about it for this video. So if you enjoyed this particular video, then please do click the like button, as that does help me out. Also, leave me a comment about anything that I did well at or anything that I should improve. And if you would like to see more of my videos, then please do click subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later.